Welcome to the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. The Invisible Wheelchair Podcast was selected by FeedSpot as one of the top 10 obsessive-compulsive disorder podcasts on the web. I'm Donald Grodoff, EFT tapping practitioner and OCD coach at FamilyOCD.com. On the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, I focus on the hidden world of OCD and anxiety with interviews and information around this topic. My purpose is to bring about awareness of OCD, those who treat OCD, and of course, those who suffer with OCD. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is a treatable and manageable disorder. In my practice at FamilyOCD.com, I guide people through the process of ERP therapy and other alternative treatments. If you know of someone suffering with OCD, I can help. Simply visit FamilyOCD.com. If you or someone you know suffers or has suffered and recovered from OCD and would like to get their story out, simply contact us through www.invisiblewheelchair.com. We want to talk to you and get your story out on the podcast. Know that the ideas and thoughts presented here are not necessarily those of Family OCD, Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, or Donald Grodoff. We also ask you to take just a few moments and leave comments at www.invisiblewheelchair.com. Those comments help us to know what the next topic should be, and we really want to hear from you. Now, let's get to that podcast. I recently came across a movie called Unstuck, a movie about young children dealing with OCD. I found it to be a wonderful educational tool for people, especially children, suffering with OCD. I am linking the movie on my invisiblewheelchair.com and familyocd.com websites. And today, I'm lucky enough to have this privilege of introducing you to one of the creators of that movie, Unstuck, Chris Baier. Chris Baier is a parent of a teenager with OCD living in Brooklyn, New York, so he has an understanding of the struggles parents and kids go through on a daily basis dealing with this disorder. Over the past few years, Chris has used his affiliation with producing Unstuck, the OCD Kids movie that advocates for those with OCD and their families around the world, to speak to mental health conferences, create OCD Construct, a global digital OCD conference, and host OCD Kids Speak Out, a monthly live streaming show. And now, let's go to the interview. So Chris, thank you so much for being part of the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, and I welcome you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Any chance to kind of talk about OCD and create awareness is always a good thing.
And that's what we're all about. What I always ask my guest is if they could give just a little more of maybe a personal story or a story about yourself. Kind of gives my audience a chance to kind of know you a little better. Could you do that?
Sure. Yeah. Our story, we've OCD's been in our family for over 7 years now. A few years ago, I was a parent of a child with OCD. Now I'm a parent of a teenager with OCD. So it's come and gone, and things have, we've had our rough patches and our patches where OCD really wasn't in our life over the past few years. But really, when my daughter finished her third grade school year, she almost had like a flip of a switch, and suddenly she was scared and afraid of all these things outdoors and bugs and germs and looking at labels. It was like we didn't know what happened to our daughter. It was just incredible anxiety, threw us for a loop. We really had no idea what was going on. So our first summer, we really were doing a lot of education, understanding, talking to different therapists, trying to figure out what this was. And our story has a good amount of luck into it, because if you read a lot of statistics or start looking online at many people's stories, it takes a lot of people a long time to get diagnosed. Sometimes they say it's between 5 or 8 or 10 years. In our case, it was about 12 weeks. And a lot of it happened by chance. Somebody at my wife's office said, "Hey, what you're talking about sounds like OCD. Have you ever looked into that?" That light bulb went on. Great, let's look into OCD. Yeah, it does sound interesting. Then we started to research and use Google to find out, like, what is OCD, how is it treated, what type of therapy, and understood very quickly that we needed a special type of therapy, exposure response prevention. It wasn't enough to just go to a child family therapist or a play therapist, or at the time, my daughter was quickly into art therapy. So we quickly realized we needed a specialist and a professional who understood how OCD was treated, which was another good dose of luck for us. And then we got her into therapy and treatment very quickly. We live in Brooklyn, New York. We still had to travel 45 minutes on the subway to find the right therapist. Fortunately, now 7 years later, there's a lot more options here in Manhattan and a lot more options around our area, but we still, had to go into the city. It took us a good, I would say, 2.5 years for our daughter to really start getting better, getting OCD out of our lives. My wife and I and our younger daughter learning how not to accommodate, treating exposures as the number one thing to do every day, and really get on top of and see progress. OCD therapy, as you know, can be like 2 steps forward, 10 steps back. You make small amounts of progress, but you try to celebrate every win. And there's a lot you learn. Parenting, you have to learn how to unparent a lot of your natural instincts. And we had to do that. And just as our daughter learned to fight her fears, and we learned that she had to do it herself, we learned tips and tricks. We learned what worked and what didn't work, how to give her control and when to take control. This was, I would say, about the year 2016 that things started to get better. And at the time, we started a parent group here in Brooklyn of parents of kids with OCD, because you quickly realize when you're going through therapy and you have this disorder in your life that there are things that you need to do with therapy that it's hard to talk to your family and friends about. And so we started a group where parents could really talk about the things they really had to deal with. The fact that, if you told some friends certain different types of exposure therapy that you were doing at home, they'd be like, "Wait a minute, that's not right. You shouldn't be doing that." And you really understand that there's a goal behind that. So one of the parents that joined the parent group was a woman named Kelly Anderson. Her daughter had OCD. And the first day I met Kelly and she came to the meeting, she's like, "I'm a filmmaker, I'm a documentarian, and I know there's a film about OCD. I just don't know what it is yet." Kelly and I stayed friends. We had, at the time, the group was meeting once every month, once every 6 weeks. It was a good, 6 or 10 parents that would come all the time, and it was really productive. And our daughters got into the same group therapy in Upper Manhattan at a school, at the Icon School at Mount Sinai here in New York. And our daughters, it was a free OCD camp for 12 weeks. 8 or 9 kids who were between the ages of 9 and 12 got together and they worked on therapy together. And it was a blessing. This program was fantastic. The therapist, Dr. Rojas, was just fantastic. The kids really got to know their disorder, understand that there were other kids like them, and work on exposures together. And on the way home, one day, Kelly was driving both my daughter and her daughter home, and they were having a really adult discussion about OCD, their issues, what they lost, how it affected them. And the idea popped into Kelly's head. We're just going to point the camera at the kids and allow them to tell their story because they are the experts in their disorder. And that's what we did. And it took about 18 months, and we created this film called Unstuck, an OCD Kids movie, premiered at the 2017 OCD conference. We've been promoting it ever since, doing little things here or there to kind of spread the word and use social media and video tools that are out there to kind of create word and create awareness and allow kids to tell their stories. So our family story, thanks for letting me ramble on a bit, but our family story really started as a personal journey. Our family understanding OCD, really needing help from everyone out there, whether it was parents or families, therapists, understanding what it is, and then turning into a position where things were better in our life. We could give back. And fortunately, we were able to create this film, which is kind of providing, I guess, education as well as hope and inspiration to parents and families.
Education to me is very important. Like you talked about family and friends, they scatter like like crazy when you even talk about that, because they don't understand it. They don't know what to do. My wife always says that, if you had cancer or if you had a sickness, people would be bringing meals over to you and they'd be helping. When you talk about a mental illness or some like OCD or any of this, it's the complete opposite. So I understand, and this your movie, I believe, helps people to understand it better. So maybe they can change the way that happens. So you get these kids together. I take it the kids out of the movie were the ones that were basically at camp. Is that true, or did you find them elsewhere?
Yeah, one of them was Jake, who's in the film. He was from the camp, and Jake and my daughter Vanessa were the ones we kind of used to do the initial interviews with and create our trailer to kind of help with fundraising. And then the rest of the kids came from throughout the country, and actually one kid came from the United Arab Emirates. It's a pretty international cast. Sarah's from Missouri. Ariel was based in Florida. Sharif was from the UAE. Last but not least is Holden. Holden and his family were from Seattle, although now they're based in Latin America. So it was a pretty international cast, and we found them by putting the word out through different therapists and different message boards that were out there. There was a big, at the time, I don't think it's active anymore, but there was a big listserv called Parents of Kids with OCD. It was like a Yahoo group. And just putting the word out there, I got at least 3 or 4 leads, and then connecting with therapists at Rogers Behavioral Hospital that helped us connect to people. It was really good. The community, by the community, I mean, a lot of therapists would say like, listen, I can't help you, or I don't have anybody that fits this description, but talk to this person, or, connect to this person, or call the OCD Foundation, they'll help you. And it was really helpful to kind of talk to different people, make connections, and understand that people were willing to help. So really, we maybe had about 12 or 15 kids that we initially talked to. I did the initial interviews. We had to make sure that the kids could all understand and talk from an expert and a positive point of view. And then, Kelly would talk to the kids that, we thought were really good or could, and we were clearly looking for a diverse cast. We were looking for a cast with a lot of different issues. It was very important to us not to focus on the things that people thought OCD was. So while many of the kids did deal with hand washing, door opening and closing, things like, that people assumed is OCD, we made sure not to focus on that. We focused on other issues so that people understood scrupulosity and just right and perfectionism and things like that, so that they understood that OCD was more than just what was easy to show in film.
Well, yeah, that was one of the things that stood out for me because, like Holden, for instance, with the bodybuilding,
Magical thinking.
yeah, it's just that was amazing. And then the one where she was writing in the Bible, so it really did help to show people, because that is one of the problems too, is with OCD, is that people kind of assume it to be hand washing or that it's organizational or something like that, and there's so many diverse ways it shows up. It's unbelievable. I think that was one thing I thought was wonderful about the film, that you were able to find the diversity. How did you get the kids motivated to want to be able to talk?
Many of the kids, once we kind of heard their story and talked to them, we didn't really have to, bribe them, coax them at all. It was really like they understood that they could help others. It's an amazing thing that is consistent in just about every kid or parent I talk to. When they are on the other side, and by that I mean like they've had victories and their kids in a better place. And OCD isn't controlling their lives as much. There's this willingness and understand that A, I want to give back, and B, I want people to learn what I went through, so they don't have to go through the same things, or they understand they're not alone. And there's so much power in understanding you're not alone. I think my daughter's journey to recovery started the day she met another kid that was 9 years old. And she used to say, like, if you show me another 9-year-old who has OCD, I'll believe it's real. And she did, and we did. And that, to me, was the first way we could show her that OCD lies, and it's the world's biggest liar. And she was able to start getting better that day. And so we're able to show with these kids and understanding they're talking from a point of positivity, understanding that they understand what their brain goes through. And so it really wasn't too hard to convince people to come on screen. There were a couple who were a little more reluctant, but I think when they saw the trailer that we put together and understood our goals and realized from day one, we said, look, if there's a topic you don't want to talk about, we don't have to bring that up. You don't have to answer a question, and we'll find other ways around it. But they were all open and great, and talked about their issues, and we were able to, have little happy accidents. So my daughter Charlotte, when we were filming Vanessa, initially, she said, I want to be interviewed. And I said to Kelly, come on, let's just interview her. Let's please just placate Charlotte. And the interview ended up being so powerful. And what she said was so touching to us that we were like, wait a minute, this is it. This is how we can include the other members of the family. We can talk to the siblings. And the siblings can take the place of a mom and a dad or a doctor. And it allowed us to talk about the family in a whole different way and show that, hey, OCD doesn't just affect the person who has it, but it affects the whole family as well as the siblings. So there were a lot of, that after doing that initial interview, we would almost ask everybody, is your sibling willing? And Holden's sister Tatum was willing to talk on camera. And that was fantastic because it allowed us to really show a bigger impact that OCD makes on the entire family.
And so how have you seen this movie have you seen like a ripple effect from it in certain ways?
I think that it's been around for a couple of years. And so one of the things that we started 2020, Kelly and I were like, okay, we can kind of dial back on some of the promotional things we were doing. I was running an online YouTube, like Facebook Live show called OCD Kids Speak Out. I kind of stopped that. We were like, okay, we've been able to, kind of make an impact, and now we can start working on other projects. And we realized that word of mouth through therapists and parenting communities had finally picked up. So a lot of people were talking about it. I think that most people appreciate that it's short and it's quick and it tells a story, and it comes out with an inspirational message. And by no means are we saying OCD is cured. It's something that you're never going to deal with all your life, but we were trying to create a film that we would have wanted to see the day we were diagnosed. Because the day you hear, oh, my daughter's got OCD, my son's got OCD, you're like, oh no, so many thoughts go into your head. And for us, if we had seen something that was explained what it was, explained how it affected you, explained how therapy works, and also presented a way like, look, it's bad now, but it can get better. It allows you to at least take a breath. And I think a lot of people are thankful when they're able to see that. It kind of helps them get grounded a little bit and understand the right path. And we've used our website, the OCD Kids Movie site, to put links of our favorite resources, our books, whether they're kids or teens or for parents, podcasts, different friends we've met over the years to kind of connect people to resources we think are valuable and helpful to people. I mean, one of the best things that's happened over the last 3 years is the explosion of the internet. And this year specifically, I mean, 2 years ago, I had to tell people how to download Zoom and how to use it. And now kids to grandparents understand how to Zoom and do backgrounds and all that stuff. So it's amazing. Podcasts have exploded, and Instagram stories and blogs, and the ability to people to tell their story. It's been incredible. So we've kind of tried to amplify as many voices as possible. And the films give us a platform to do many things that we never thought we would be able to do.
So with 2020 and the virus, how's the movie been affected, and how has it affected that scenario?
One of the biggest things we realized early on was, we just saw the outcry on social media. That's kind of been like our sounding board, and understanding how scared people were, whether they had OCD or not, and understanding that when you saw the guidelines that came out, stay away from people, wash your hands for a certain amount of time, cover your face, it was almost like the anxiety and fear were heightened from people in our community. So we started to do some more live stream events, put together resources, and created a new page on our site to kind of help people out and understand how to, deal with it. And this was an instance for OCD anyway, where it was like, well, see, OCD was right. See, these things I'm afraid of, they could kill me. And so it was, therapists getting them together and understanding that, yes, there are certain things you have to do to protect your health, but an exposure for you then is to only do it for 20 seconds rather than 5 minutes, or to do what the science recommends you do, but not take it extreme and not listen to your OCD fears. And so from the COVID angle, we just got more involved and tried to help people out and relieve the anxiety that came from just general issue that everybody was feeling with the pandemic. And then film wise, I think it also still gave it another avenue, because many people were stuck at home with their kids and stuck at home with their other loved ones, and realizing that things were exploding, and some people issues were worse at home. And so it kind of gave them another perspective, and gave the film another reason to be, and another reason to kind of help people. And so it's been a silver lining out of all this is, we've been able to, still get a lot of views and a lot of people asking about it, and people still screening it. And, the number one question this year was, can we screen it virtually? And of course, the answer is absolutely.
You have it sounds like a new project with the OCD Can Deconstruct. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Sure. 2 years ago, I had always had this idea after going, I don't know if you've ever been to the International OCD Foundation conference.
No, I haven't been able to, no.
The only drawback, I think, of the conference is that it can be expensive and does involve travel, but we've been fortunate to go. And they're so incredible, because you learn so much. You're around not just therapists, but there's like 1,000 people, and over half of the attendees are families and kids, from young as 5 to teenagers. And so it's incredible to see a community come together, and you get such a positive feeling coming out of this conference. And so I had always left thinking, the only problem with this is it's not accessible to people. You have to spend money to get to it. And we all know that OCD therapy and OCD treatment costs money. I mean, my wife and I joked that my daughter got OCD and we got debt. So,
I understand that, yes.
Right? So it pays into it. I had fortunate through the film, like I said, it gave us a platform. So Unstuck gave us a platform to meet a lot of therapists, talk to a lot of people, interview people. And so I was able to kind of say, I want to put together an online resource. And Zoom was brand new at the time. This is, late 2018. And I realized there it is. There's the way I can bring an OCD conference to the world. And so I got a bunch of therapists together, and I realized it just needed to be a short amount of time. And I put together this OCD Construct. And we basically, the whole idea was like, let's give people a crash course in understanding what's important about OCD. So from OCD, like the basics of what an obsession is and a compulsion is, and how it's treated, to intrusive thoughts, ERP, how medication works, how medication plays into that, and therapy and supplements, how it affects the family, how it affects kids. And so, in like a 4-hour time period, we were kind of able to have therapists talk for a bit and then answer questions. And then I also reached out to a lot of friends of mine that ran charities and did little interviews with them, so that, people weren't just left to think, okay, this is all. No, there's more. You can connect with the ICDF. You can connect with Made of Millions. You can connect with the OCD Stories. You can connect with MAD, who was a friend of mine, Dan, that ran the charity, and they were our sponsors. So it was a way to kind of give back to the community, do something that allowed people. And I did the conference. This was back in April of 2019, and I did it for free. And so it was a way for the world to come together. And I had 2,000 people over 65 countries tune in. It was pretty crazy. What I did was I basically I recorded the entire event. So people can now purchase the entire event, or they can purchase different talks, which is what most people tend to do. So most people tend to, the ERP and the OCD 101 and the intrusive thoughts tend to be the most popular ones, because those are the things people hear about the most. And so those tend to be the most popular ones. So it was a way to it was a free conference. And now it's an additional resource that people can find and view whenever they want.
Yeah, I received an email on it today, actually. So, and I hadn't had a chance to do it, but I'm probably going to at least go through some of them. So it looks really, really interesting and really good. Well, Chris, this is a topic I think both of us could talk about for hours, I would imagine. But before we leave, what I'd like to ask you to do, how best can people find out more information about the movie, about the Deconstruct, about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me again. And if anybody's listening to this, I think that, clearly know that you're not alone. that things can get better. It is it is an extremely hard thing as a parent to watch your child go through these, OCD tortures kids, OCD tortures the family. It wants to take over everyone's lives. Just understand that as hard as it can get better, and it will get better if you're able to stick through it and you're able to find the child the right therapy. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Bearman. The film and all of our resources, including sibling pages and resources for therapists, is at ocdkidsmovie.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at the same handle at OCD Kids Movie. And OCD Construct is ocdconstruct.com. I'd also love to say that Unstuck is available in 7 different languages. So it's subtitled in Spanish, French, Portuguese, Russian, and Greek. And we also have closed captions and audio descriptions. So, it's a little more available for international resources. So welcome to spread the news and share the site out, and we appreciate it. And you can also watch the film for free on us if your most public libraries or schools have a service called Canopy. And if you use your Canopy login, which I think is available on Roku TVs as well as public libraries, you can watch the film for free.
And I'll remind my audience that I also will have all this information under the resource section of the invisiblewheelchair.com. So, Chris, again, this is your movie to me is so important. When you told your story to me, it resonated completely through me because we went through the same stuff. The movie, I think, helps to educate, and that to me is so important. So I thank you once again for being part of this and for all the things that you're doing for the OCD community and for parents all over the place.
Thank you. And thank you for, every single person like yourself who is jumping out there and doing podcasts and stories and sharing their wisdom and connecting other people is doing a great service to us. Also, thank you for the podcast and for, the resources you have on your site and for having me on.
This concludes this podcast. We really would appreciate your comments. Simply leave a comment at www.invisiblewheelchair.com. There, you're able to submit a comment that will help us determine future podcasts. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, please email Don at invisiblewheelchair.com. Remember, there is a corresponding tapping recording for each of the podcasts, with the exception of the interview podcast. You can find these tapping recordings and archive past podcasts at www.invisiblewheelchair.com. Finally, there is relief for OCD, and we at FamilyOCD.com and FocusedHealthyFamily.com can help you find that relief. Again, you can contact us through those sites, FamilyOCD.com or FocusedHealthyFamily.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at InvisibleWheel1, that's the number 1, or at FamilyOCD. So thank you for listening. Keep tapping and transcending your life to new heights.